Hi, so today we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to go through a Q&A and ask me anything. I have had some questions come in and several of them I think are pretty fun. Most everyone sees zero fun in insurance, and I promise I have at least one non-insurance-y question that I am going to get to that I absolutely love. So we're going to get into this Q&A. It's going to be fun. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to get to HR related questions and also a personal question. So the very first question that I want to get to is, what is your arm workout / routine? I love this question. I am going to get to this a little bit later. It is not your typical, oh, I do this split or this routine or that routine. It is absolutely going to surprise you. I shock everyone with my answer, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to get to that just a little bit later. But first, I am going to get to an HRE question. And I do get this question fairly frequently with my clients related to STD. No, not sexually transmitted diseases. I remember the first time I started talking about STD insurance, my mom looked at me and she goes, "There's insurance for that?" Like thinking, what has this world come to? But STD in insurance land means short-term disability. And yes, there's short-term disability insurance. And most of the time, this is paired with long-term disability insurance. And many short-term disability plans have a 1 week period where they don't cover anything. So if you're disabled for just a week, you're really not going to get any coverage from a short-term disability plan. And the length of time they will cover up to is usually 3 months, 6 months, or a year with most short-term disability plans. And then that dovetails into a long-term disability plan, which usually goes to Social Security normal retirement age, which for most people is age 65 or 67. So the question that I have about STD is, what happens when an employee goes on maternity leave and has a short-term disability plan? Yes, many short-term disability plans do cover maternity and labor, pregnancy. However, it does have to be labeled as a disability, which can only be done through a doctor. So most disability plans define a disability as injury or illness, and that does fall, maternity and pregnancy does fall under those categories. However, you don't just go out on maternity leave and automatically start getting a check. You do have to complete a form in most cases with your insurance carrier, and there will be a section for your employer to complete stating you're no longer working. That's one of the caveats to collecting disability monies or filing a claim and getting paid what the plan says you should get paid, is that you're not usually getting paid from your employer and from the disability company. Part of the deal is that you are no longer getting a paycheck from your employer because you're no longer working. And therefore, the insurance company is filling in that gap for that disability period. So there is a section that the employer needs to complete, there's a section that the employee needs to complete, and there's a section that the doctor needs to complete. The doctor will say, this employee should no longer be working due to this pregnancy, or they're on bed rest, or they had a baby, labor, and due to injuries from that, it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever the amount of period that they recommend that they stay home and away from work. Typically, it's 6 weeks for a vaginal birth and 8 weeks for a C-section that they will pay out on. And again, the elimination period is 7 days. So for the first 7 days, that employee will not be paid from the insurance company because there's what they call an elimination period. And most people fill that in with sick time or vacation time. The claim must be filed. It's not automatic. We talked about that. works alongside FMLA or any other particular state program. So if you live in a state like California, you have short-term disability, state disability coverage that will coordinate payments with your short-term disability private insurance plan. Most people in a state like California do not buy additional short-term disability because at the end of the day, let's say that state disability pays out 80% to you and of your pre-disability earnings, and the individual or the group plan pays out usually 60 or 66%. They're never going to pay those amounts independently. They're always going to coordinate. So most of the time, it only makes sense for the state disability to pay out, and then that private insurance that you've been paying for potentially really does nothing. It just sits there because they're not going to pay you out 60% and this one's 80%. There's no situation where an insurance company is going to be paying you more than you made while you were working. No one would ever go back to work, and the insurance companies know that. There's lots of data on what percentages they need to be paying employees that are out on disability to incentivize them to come back to work. So that's always the goal of the employer, usually the employee as well, and the insurance company, is to get the employee back to work. However, not let them go bankrupt in the meantime is really the purpose of the short-term disability. Now on to this next question, which again, I get asked frequently, and it's about babies. Again, about babies. Maybe I have a lot of women. Maybe because I am a woman, I attract a lot of female clients. But this question I get at least weekly. We have an employee, that's having a baby. What is the effective date, and how are these claims going to be handled? We have this new little person coming into the world, and we can't enroll them ahead of time. I have employees reach out to me all the time saying, my wife is pregnant, or I'm pregnant and I'm due on this day. Can I get the baby added? And unfortunately, no, we cannot enroll a person until we have a date of birth and a social security number. So there's no enrolling the baby before the delivery happens, or the C-section happens, or the baby is born. So those are the two main points. And really the next follow-up to this is, what is the effective date? Is it first the month following the date of birth? So that if they're born June 20th, is their effective date 7/1, or is it June 20th? Well, the answer is it's June 20th. It gets backdated to the date the baby was born. Now, this doesn't always happen automatically. There's always some additional manual admin work that me or my team has to do to ensure that that baby's effective date is showing correctly. We often have insurance companies, their systems are always set up for, or most of the time they're set up for first the month following an event date. And there may be a gap in coverage there, and it is a good idea to keep a close eye on newborns if you're administrating a health plan. Make sure that their effective date is the date of birth. Now, kind of another question that wasn't really question that wasn't asked here, but comes up usually as a follow-up as we go through a series of questions that new mothers and new fathers have when they're having a baby, is, what is my deductible? Am I going to have to pay my deductible for the labor, and then now this new baby is in the hospital, am I going to have to pay two deductibles now? Let's say their deductible is $1,000 and labor comes. Am I going to get a $1,000 deductible bill? Am I going to get billed the $1,000 for me going in and having a baby, and another $1,000 when the baby's delivered for that baby's deductible? And the answer is, it depends. So the way the insurance company views it is, when you, the mother, check in to have the baby, you are one person. Yes, you have the baby inside of you and it's about to be born, but you are being admitted to the hospital and you are the person, the patient. The second person is not in existence yet, technically on paper. So there's no patient there. The patient is the mother. And so the claim follows that logic as well. They're billing under the patient's ID number and group number and plan. And it also happens if you stay in the hospital as a mother. If most people stay 2 days in the hospital when they have a baby, a normal delivery. And so that deductible is just one because it's billed under one person. Now, let's say you have to admit the baby, there's complications or something like that, and the baby is admitted separately. That then is a second person with a new ID card, and they will, or ID number, and they will bill a separate deductible. Or another scenario is you have the baby, you stay 2 days, you leave, you go home, you have to take the baby back to the hospital or back to the doctor for some reason. Now that is a new admission and a new deductible. So those are some of the scenarios that I see come up on a regular basis. And kind of, again, another follow-up to that is the baby's not in the system. We can't enroll the baby until we have the date of birth and the social. Okay, now we have the date of birth because the baby was born, but we don't have the social for several weeks. And there is this awkward period where technically the baby's coverage is going to be backdated to the original date of birth, but the parents don't have the ID number and the baby's not in the system yet. And the HR and the broker cannot add the baby until we have the social. And that process takes a couple of weeks. So most doctors, pediatricians, hospitals, they understand this. They too deal with this on a daily basis, especially if they're in pediatrics. They understand it takes a couple of weeks, sometimes a month to get a baby added, and they will postpone billing for you. In most situations, I have never really come across a doctor that doesn't understand that they need to wait to bill until the baby is enrolled in the system. Not to say that's never going to happen to you, or you're not going to come across a cranky doctor or cranky billing office, or maybe a billing office with a new staff member that doesn't understand the process for a newborn. But it's very common. Obviously, it happens to every single baby. They have to wait to get enrolled, and they will postpone billing for you. All right. So the next question is, what about adult dependents? I have a disabled child who will be living with me for the foreseeable future, and they're turning 26 soon. What do I do? Well, fortunately, there is what's called overage dependent status with health insurance. And you do have to submit a form to show that your child is permanently disabled or has a permanent disability. And the doctor will have to write a note and help you fill out that form for that to be put into the system. And so there is an overage dependent status. This can be taken care of with most insurance carriers, and that really should be nothing to worry about other than the pain in the butt in doing the extra work. Unfortunately, it's not that you need any extra paperwork if you're in this situation. I'm sure you're already overly burdened with all these additional doctor's offices and appointments that you have to go through, and you're already exhausted and tired. However, there is a solution that we can work through if you do have a dependent with disabilities that's going to require them to live with you for the foreseeable future. It's called overage dependent, and that is a thing with insurance companies. So let's get into the fun part. The fun part is, what is your arm routine and what is your workout? So the answer is, I don't have one. And nobody believes me except for people that have been lifting for a long time. And Part of that is, let me just kind of like show these off a little bit. They're getting bigger. It's kind of crazy. But part of that is I have a baby and he is giant. I have this giant child. And it's funny, moms always tell me, well, doesn't mean he's going to be a football player later. My brother was an 11-pound baby and he's, only 5'5", as an adult. And I say, I don't care how big he is as an adult. He's hard now. He was hard to carry. He was hard to deliver. And he's hard to carry around and argue with as an almost 2-year-old. And part of that is gripping that little guy. And it's like a strongman workout every time, every day. And I do have a history of strength training. I absolutely love strength training. It's my tendency. I wasn't the cheerleader type in high school, if you can't tell. I was always been a little bit more of a tomboy and did some sports in high school, very minimal, and found fitness in my 20s. And along finding fitness, I actually did it because I was gaining weight after I quit smoking. In college, I had really picked up a serious caffeine and nicotine addiction and was up to sometimes 3 packs a day. That's my kind of personality. I have a little OCD, obsessive. So when I get into something, I really get into it. And that had happened to me in college. And my grandmother actually died of emphysema, which was a very impactful on me. It was a sad way to go. And I saw the pain that she had gone through in her later years in life. And I was motivated to stop smoking. So I started running every day. And when my lungs would burn from running, because I was also a smoker, I would tell myself, this is because you smoke. This is because you smoke. I was trying to brainwash myself into quitting smoking. And that wasn't working because as I was quitting smoking, I was eating hard candies and I was drinking soda out of a straw, because one of the lesser known facts I think about quitting smoking is it's a behavioral addiction. It gives you a break, you get to step outside, you get to take deep breaths and relax. You get to you get this hand-mouth behavioral addiction thing going on. And so to solve that issue, I started drinking soda for some reason. Again, don't ask me why. I was 20 and didn't really think it through too much. And I was gaining weight and I wasn't able to outrun my weight gain like I had in the past in my teenage years. So I thought, shit, I'm going to have to be one of those gym people. And I absolutely despise the thought of being a gym rat, which is pretty funny now because I really define myself probably as that, more so than not in today. And I started going to the gym, and I knew if I paid for a gym membership that I would go and I would get my money's worth, because I am a frugal girl and a penny pincher and I like a good coupon and a good deal. So I knew if I spent even just 20 bucks a month on something that I would go and I would get the most out of my money. So I did that. I signed up for a gym membership. It was 24-hour fitness in Santa Barbara, California. Started going on a regular basis and soon started taking classes, because at that time I thought that classes meant they were going to teach you how to work out. And they do kind of in classes, but not really. It's more just follow the instructor and cardio sort of thing, which was fine. And I knew that if I went enough that I would find at least something that I enjoyed. I knew that I had to find something I enjoyed to stick with it, because if I hated it, I wasn't going to do it. So I'm like, okay, out of all the types of working out, I've got to be able to at least find one that I like, kind of, or can learn to like. So I kept going, and there was this class called Body Pump. It's a Les Mills program. 24-Hour Fitness is one of the gyms that carries that program. And I really liked the weightlifting. I really liked the idea of learning to lift things, the deadlifting and the squats and chest press and all of those. And I knew that Body Pump was a very entry level to that. It was very lightweight. It was a lot of reps, and there was only so much I was going to learn about the technique and of weightlifting. I started watching Instagram videos of powerlifters and Olympic lifting, and really got fascinated by that. So I started I tried to find a female instructor, a coach, personal trainer. Back then it was very difficult. I did finally find one. Tessa, Pure Performance, I believe was the name, and she taught me the basics of squatting. And then from there I went to a powerlifting gym who he also worked with Olympic lifting, Jonathan out of Thousand Oaks, and he was fabulous in teaching me basic techniques of powerlifting and Olympic lifting. So my point is, I lifted weights every day for 10 years. The beautiful thing about resistance training and weightlifting is once you have the muscle and you keep it on for a longer period of time, the harder it is to lose, especially if you're in a fed state, especially if you're eating on a regular basis, which we are here in America. Most people have a very hard time starving themselves, and obviously not everyone. Some people have eating disorders and things like that. But if you learn how to weight lift and eat to gain muscle and burn fat, it will stay there. And that's one of the benefits that I'm reaping now as a 41-year-old is I don't have to go to the gym and do all these different splits and try all these different programs like I did in my 20s and my 30s. And again, I really obsessed on this stuff. And I did bodybuilding splits, I did powerlifting programs, I did tons of different strength and sports performance programs. So I definitely put in my dues. I'm not going to say it was easy, but in the long run, I feel that muscle pays dividends, muscle pays interest, if you will. And I did invest that time, and now I do have to use it. I do have to engage my muscle to keep it for the most part, but it's a lot less than people think, because I'll walk around and I'll have normal, I say normies come up to me and they go, "Oh my God, what do you do? Work out all day?" And that's usually what people think when they see these arms, and it's really not the case. I'm just living my life. I do have a very heavy little boy who's very active. I do have a little girl that is very active, and she keeps me busy, and I still pick her up from time to time and throw her in the pool. And so I am engaging the muscles just with playing with my kids usually, and I might do some push-ups here and there and some yoga, and I'm taking dance classes and doing a lot of functional movements, as the fitness community would call it, a lot of functional. I do some kettlebell, but I'm not doing any structured programs right now. If the question, and really at the end of the day, when people ask questions like this, they want to know what they need to do to define their arms, to get arms, or to define their shoulders better. And most women don't want shoulders like this. I mean, I really didn't start out wanting arms like this either. So part of it is probably genetics and probably just more prone to building muscle than anything else. And I always kind of joke that I'm more prone to be muscular or fat. My body just wants to build tissue either way. So my choice was I'd rather be muscular than fat. So I went that route with my mindset in that area. But most people want to know what they need to do. And one of the principles I used when I was really working on building strength and building muscle was my back. So most people look at themselves and they want to work their biceps, they want to work their abs, they want to work their quads. They look at the front of their body. I believe that's because that's what they see in the mirror. And then the opposite tends to be true. You want to train your backside. You want to train your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, your lats, all of your back muscles, low back, upper back. Rear delts are often neglected. So some of my favorite workouts, yes, were lateral raises and rear delt raises, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I did those. I did tricep pull downs. I did, pullovers. I did all of that shoulder work. However, the majority of my training and my focus was on rowing. All different positions. Bent over rows were really my favorite because I felt it had the most bang for your buck. If you can really focus on that movement and be strong in that movement, your low back's going to get stronger, your rear delts are going to, your arms are going, you have to lift things with your arms to get to your back. You're, as a consequence of working your back out, you are going to work your arms. You know, a push-up is a back workout, right? But it's also an arm workout. You can't do a push-up without working out your arms too. And if you do it right, your abs, you know, if you're really pulling it in. So I do try to tell people, focus, if you need to focus on something and learn how to do something well, you have to focus on something, and you have to learn how to do it well to build the muscle well and to do it without hurting yourself. And if you're going to focus on something and focus on exercises that are going to pay off the most with the least amount of time in the gym, which most of us don't have all this time to be doing all these fluffy workouts that aren't giving us results, build your back. Pull-ups, dips, push-ups, those are a great place to start. Planks, as much as I don't like them, are extreme. Side plank, you know, there's a million different exercises. And if you've never done a program, hire a coach, do a program. A lot of people don't want to invest the $250 or the $1,000 a month to get a good coach. You don't have to have them forever. You go, you take them, you get them for a month. If that's all you can afford, save up, put it on a credit card, pay it off over the year. It really comes out to like $100 a month if you just do it for a month, and learn from them. Have them correct your technique. Make sure you don't hurt yourself when you're loading things on the bar. I can't tell you how many times I see people in the gym and I just want to stop them and say, ow. Like, I'm surprised you haven't hurt yourself yet, but you need somebody to watch you in that squat. You need somebody to watch you in that power clean. You need somebody, because it wasn't like this when I started. It was very rare to see, let alone women in the weight room. It was all men. A lot of times I was the only woman. I love that I see women in there all the time now. But with that, the popularity of weightlifting, I love that it's more popular. However, also a lot of the strength moves have become more popular and more cool and more Instagram worthy. So people are doing power cleans that shouldn't be doing power cleans. People are doing these deep squats that really have no business doing heavy, heavy squats at all. And the best advice I can tell you is, if you don't know what you're doing, and you just hire somebody that does. And I'm not a coach. So don't reach out. This isn't a sales pitch for that. I'm just an insurance lady that fell in love with weightlifting in her 20s and has these crazy arms and gets attention in the grocery store shopping for my kids. And people ask me what the heck is going on over here. And so this is my answer to that question. It's a lot longer than I thought it would be. Thank you for hanging out until the end. If you have any other questions you would like me to answer, please shoot them my way at melissa@nomadInsgrp.com. I'm going to have a link down below if you want to schedule a free assessment with me. Your first time is 100% free, so please take advantage of that. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.